Tony Fergusson, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here. Where are you in the world right now?
So I'm based out of Copenhagen, Denmark.
Nice. Dagot. My God.
Yeah.
Was that all right? Does that sound Danish? That's all I could do.
Yeah, my Danish is okay, but I'm a bit rusty, really.
Cool. Well then we're two.
Yeah.
Do you have a Tesla?
Yes, I actually do.
You actually do. You don't know where I'm going with this. I wasn't sure if you're gonna say yes or no, but I was gonna say if you don't have a Tesla, what you do have is a knack for metaphors.
Yeah.
Or analogies.
True.
I'm not sure which is which anymore, but you at least wrote an article, and it was called "What Can IT Learn from Tesla About Disrupting the Status Quo?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna get into why you wrote that article, but before that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So Tony Fergusson, I am the Chief Information Security Officer for EMEA, Zscaler. I've actually been here at Zscaler for 2 years. But before that is probably the more interesting part of my career, and that's where I sort of spent a lot of time doing network and security, very much around zero trust, for actually 10 years as a customer. So yeah, I've been in the industry for coming on 30 years now, so really have seen a lot and seen the whole industry evolve. And you could argue like the last 12 years, I've really been very focused around zero trust. That sort of now keeps me very busy as this has become a bit of a buzzword and industry trend. Yeah.
I would ask you normally what is zero trust, but I think we'll save that later. It'll be more like a quiz at the end of the podcast. So and maybe I'll tell you what zero trust is at the end, and we'll see if I've understood it correctly.
Okay. Deal.
Luckily, I can just delete that out if I actually don't have the answer at the end.
Yeah.
But hey, your article, what can IT learn from Tesla about disrupting the status quo? Why don't you explain your metaphor for us there?
So, so spending this time, 10 years driving a journey, right? A transformation journey, really changing the way IT delivered applications towards the users, changing the way we secured that, and really seeing all the outcomes of how I could actually try to simplify the architecture, how I could reduce down costs and all these things. I thought it was quite fascinating that I could really do so many different vectors from securing the users to reducing cost to simplifying everything. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because normally you do one of those, right? Normally you would say, hey, we're going to throw security at users, and the performance gets worse, or it's going to cost you a lot extra money. And 2 years ago when I joined Zscaler, I was thinking, wow, there is a disruption going on, and actually there are companies that, like Zscaler, that are disrupting 20 years or 30 years of network and security. So I thought, well, there's actually really a big pivotal point where I'm now talking to customers, and they've been doing something here, and now there's a new paradigm shift of actually shifting to doing it in a completely different way. So I was quite fascinated by this pivotal change. And actually that's when I sort of looked at other disruptions in the market. And me loving cars and actually owning a Tesla, I was like, now that's, I love technology, right? And of course, if you love technology, how can you not love a Tesla that is just full of technology, right? And I suppose what I took from that is I thought, well, here's another company that's actually making change. They're actually disrupting the market. And what's really interesting when I started looking into this is I did some research around it, and I found out that actually a combustion engine has about 2,000 moving parts. Yeah, it's really complicated, and we've been actually trying to optimize this combustion engine for the last 100 years, and we didn't really get that far. Right? We got to about 30 or 40%, right, of how far we could optimize the efficiency of it. And then I was thinking that's fascinating, because when you look at the shift to electric vehicles, there we're sort of running at 85% efficiency. But where's all the complexity, right? There's only about 20 moving parts in an electric vehicle, right? and it's 85% efficient. You know, and from my perspective, I just think it's a complete different shift from, you know, what I used to drive in a, you know, an automatic or a manual car with an engine and pumping out CO2 out the back, right? Compared to this experience you have in an electric vehicle. So I took that and thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Because Elon Musk had this fantastic quote that I thought, that's really interesting. He said, the biggest mistake of a smart engineer is to optimize a thing that shouldn't exist. I was like, wow. And in a car, it's actually the engine that they got rid of, right? The engine doesn't exist, yeah? Sure, you have motors on each wheel and you have this battery as a platform, but it's that mindset shift from moving away from a complex engine, removing a part, saying, actually, do I even need it? And then trying to do it in a different way, where the car still takes you from A to B, right? And then I flipped that around and said, how do I see that in technology today? And one of the things I've learned over the years is that we do have a lot of complexity in IT. And we have added a lot of components into our network to secure the network, bolt-on solutions. And that complexity, really, I wondered, is that actually providing security? Does complexity equal security? And when I looked at this, I thought that doesn't actually add up. What actually is the best way to secure things is actually try to simplify things. And I think that's the big learning of my journey from, you know, starting at a place where we had a lot of complexity, breaking down the complexity, saying, what am I trying to solve? I just need a user to connect to some data, or I need a user to connect to an application. Looking at it from that point of view, and how do I solve that challenge, and taking a different approach. I think that's where I sort of come up with this idea to compare two industries and where we see disruption.
It was a good article. I'm gonna put it in the show notes.
Okay, great.
So the answer to your metaphor, I guess you're going from, you know, I have one question there. What did you mean by minimize moving parts to enhance the zero trust value proposition? Because I feel like that's like the answer to the metaphor. What were you alluding to there?
Yeah. So think about this. So, you know, when you think about where we started, like we had this sort of what we call castle and moat type security model, right? So you basically said, hey, everyone on the inside, they're all safe. Everyone on the outside is bad, right? Keep the bad people out, put firewalls around. And then, you know, as time went on, we just said, oh, but we need extra security. We need to build the castle walls up. Like, let's build it higher. Let's put more appliances, more technology to protect the things inside, yeah? And actually, that becomes a really complex challenge because the world isn't like a castle. Because I had users that were working from home. I also had 100 offices, right? So it wasn't just one wall, right? How do I now protect across the globe? Then I'm, we can use a big MPLS wide area network and we connect everything together, right? And that brings extra complexity to the entire architecture of what you're doing from a network and security standpoint. And really, when you think about it, what was I trying to achieve? I was really trying to achieve, I didn't necessarily need MPLS. I didn't necessarily actually even need those walls, right? What I actually really wanted to do was securely connect a user to an application. That was it. And somehow removing some of those moving parts, like your firewalls, like your sandbox technology that you've got on the edge, like your SSL and VPNs and all this stuff, getting rid of VPN completely, I saw as an opportunity to simplify our world so that I could actually drive more value, get better security, right? Make users happier because it works and it's seamless and it's actually easy to use. But make sure that, you know, when things go wrong, that I wasn't, you know, trying to work out, hey, is it this piece of technology or this, right? Because I found that things got so complicated that, you know, even having the overview and insights to where a problem lied could be really difficult, right?
Mm, mm. And I mean, I'll try to get away from this metaphor eventually, but the moving parts, you said them just now, firewalls, VPNs, what other like moving parts that were things that that were moving that you wanted to simplify, or that would have made your life easier?
Yeah, so funny enough, think of the moving part of this. Think about the actual enterprise network itself. My goal was to remove that completely. I said, why do my users need to even be on the corporate network? Give you a good example, network access control. Think about these sorts of technologies, right? That say, hey, you connect to the network, we authenticate who you are, then we allow you on the network. Even those technologies, I didn't want. I just said, I want a user that can be anywhere. They could be on premise, in the building, but they don't necessarily have to connect to my corporate network. They could be at home, but I want to make sure that that user could connect to what they need, but not have the complexity of, hey, when I bring my laptop in, that we had some administrators that had to look at, hey, how does that user authenticate themselves on the network? So there's all those sorts of moving parts, and even just trying to secure the network itself is difficult. Thinking about your MPLS, your routers, and other things that, trying to do segmentation, right? Trying to then split the network into smaller parts, because that's what we were told to do, right? Have a DMZ, have different parts. That also drove the complexity up, yeah? And then find out what rules do I need between which segments. So complexity wasn't just the number of technologies and appliances I had. The complexity was also in what those were doing. My rules. What did my rule set look like? I had a big rule set on my firewall. Could I even understand what the hell it was doing? Because, geez, it evolved over many years, right?
And so did all those other products as well, right? It wasn't just the firewall, it was all these other things.
Yeah, load balancers, most of the traffic is encrypted today, right? So I was also thinking, what is my firewall doing? Because everything is going towards the internet on destination port 443, outbound, encrypted. So, okay, how do I deal with that, right? And what am I going to do in the future when we see more and more traffic being encrypted? How do I inspect? How do I make sure nothing bad comes down to that user? How do I make sure no data left the enterprise? So it was all those sort of challenges that I was really trying to solve.
And you were trying to solve this. What year was that? That was in, before Zero Trust was like a big buzzword, I guess, right?
So, yeah, so look, my introduction to Zero Trust was back in 2010, right? So my journey started in 2010. And the journey started because I went to London to a Forrester seminar, and I met John Kindervac. So he did a session called No More Chewy Centers. And I was like, wow. And that's where, he coined the term Zero Trust. And I was fascinated by this. Wow, what a paradigm. What a great idea. Let's do least privilege. Let's make sure that, every device is, there's a perimeter around every device, basically, right? And only what they need access to, they should be granted. So I thought it's a fantastic idea, because I thought that would help secure my users and my applications. So I sat down with John afterwards and I said, love the idea. How do I do it? Because, it's a great concept, but what technology can I use? And what I realized very quickly is when I started to research this area, and the answers he gave back to me was like, actually, there isn't really anything good out there. It really wasn't.
That's your job, Tony.
Yeah, that was my job. So I was like, come on, there's nothing out here that's going to solve this. This is a bit of a really nice vision. But in 2010, I really doubted whether we'd ever get there, yeah? I thought it was a nice way to go, but I saw that it was just too difficult, yeah? I almost put it in the too difficult bucket. And over time, I think I came to realize, actually, technology changes pretty fast, and a lot faster than we even imagine, right? And software-defined networking was really the key thing that I think drove us towards saying, actually, I think we might have a way of doing this, right? Software-defined perimeter, which Cloud Security Alliance started talking about. I think this was the time when we started saying, okay, maybe there is a way of doing this, right?
Can you explain that part just a little bit? I know there's like there's software-defined everything, networking, software-defined XYZ. Why was that a part of the answer to your problem there?
So one of the problems when I looked at Zero Trust is was where was I going to put the firewall? Did I have to put a firewall around every device? Every device does have one, but how do I put controls in place around everything? So around every user and every application, how do I put controls around everything? Because effectively in 2010, what did I have? I had firewalls, right? And when I looked at that, I was like, well, this is going to be complicated. It's going to be costly if I have to put firewalls everywhere. And the software-defined approach changed that model because it said, hey, I have a control plane. I have a data plane. So it's all software-defined. And actually, I can have a policy that starts to follow those things, follow that user. So rather than the firewall following the user, the policy would follow the user. Yeah, and those enforcement points could be anywhere, right? They could be on the internet. And I think that's where I realized that, what we were doing wrong, and I worked out this quite quickly, is we'd been putting this perimeter around our company and making sure everything on the inside's good and nothing on the outside's bad. But what we should have been doing, and we should have thought about it differently and flipped it up the other way, is we should have been looking, how can I put a perimeter around the internet? And then make sure that the user goes through that to get to the internet. Because if I did that, I wouldn't care where that user was. And it's actually what cloud and software-defined networking provided us. It provided us a cloud service around the world that is effectively a perimeter around the internet. And as long as you go through that, then we can secure you. And it was that premise that I thought, that is upside down, right? That's upside down to what we used to do.
What'd you do at that point once you had defined that problem and figured out that there were solutions out there, maybe not as mature as they are at the time?
Yeah.
Right now, today it's came a long way since 2010. But how did you start once you realized that was something that was feasible to do?
Yeah. So one of the difficulties with change, and whether it's buying an electric car, right, or moving to a different way you deliver application access, is getting the buy-in, right? So actually, how could I get the buy-in from my executives that this was the right way to move? How could I bring other colleagues and other people in my organization along with me on the journey? Because actually transformation and moving along this isn't just about technology, right? It's about people and processes and a lot of other things. So, I knew that this is the way I felt that we needed to go, but of course not everyone was in agreement with me. And so really being, somebody to educate and teach people that, hey, this was the advantages and these were the outcomes. These are the things we're going to get out of this, right? If we can do this, then we're going to be more agile. If we do this, we're going to be able to adopt cloud easier. If we do this, we're going to have users that are secured even if they're outside of the office, right? Because think back in 2010, what did you do? You just brought the people back into the corporate office over VPN, and then you tried to secure them, and it was not a great user experience. And we had hundreds of offices, and I also had the problem of how do I secure all of those, right? It was a costly thing to go and deploy hardware and appliances out to 100 offices, right?
Were they like, Was there anybody inside your company like worried about their job at that point? They're like, yeah, but we have to have that. My job is to manage a firewall, the VPNs, and all this. Like, was it like that, or was it just they weren't completely on board with the idea of changing everything that they had invested all this time and effort into?
So, no, actually, yeah, you could argue that there are probably people that were, hey, it was more like, hey, this is what I've always done. Yeah?
Yeah.
And why should I change? Right? This is working. We are keeping the bad people out. We've got firewalls. We're configuring them. We're doing it okay. More than, hey, I'm going to lose my job. Because actually, in IT, I think, we've all got too much to do, basically. And are we working on the right things? So rather than saying, hey, we don't need you anymore, I want you to concentrate on something else, right? I don't want you to do this job, but I want you to do this job. You need to adapt and to what's actually required. So, yeah, I don't think we really had that much pushback. It was more the pushback on, hey, this is something new. It's different. There is risk always in adopting new technology. I think that was generally the pushback.
So what? And then tell us how it actually went. Like once you started, how was the transition to zero trust, if I can say that?
Yeah. So it sort of, it took me sort of the first 5 years roughly, right, to sort of really get all my offices to be more internet friendly. And what I mean internet friendly is have local breakouts at all the offices, right? Because remember, we were very much bringing all the traffic back to headquarters, right? So
via VPN.
Yeah, VPN right. And wide area networks. So we bring everyone back in the castle, right? I spent the first sort of 5 years really concentrating on direct to internet, making sure that users, when they went to the internet, they didn't come back into the headquarters, they just went direct out to the internet. And then around 2015 was really where it started to change, and I started looking at how do I now get a user to a private application, right, to an internal. How do I actually get rid of the VPN and rid of these sorts of things? And so that's where really we adopted a zero trust network access tool. And when we adopted this, that was again a huge pivotal point where I said, okay, this is different, because I was no longer connecting my user through a VPN to the network. I was connecting my user to a system that granted them application access. So I was like, yeah, okay, sounds good, because then, I could then concentrate not so much on the network, I could concentrate on the business applications. I could be more focused to what the business requirements were, who wanted what application access, and I could do this more in a zero trust way, right? Saying these users can only get to these applications. So that was the whole idea. And actually, we started with actually consultants, because we thought that would be great if we could have granular control. So we started there. And then we started doing some OT, right? Because the company I worked for, we had a lot of operational technology. So I started thinking, hey, this would be a great fit. And then when we moved on to the third part, which was replacing the VPN, then I started using the technology myself, because I was always a believer, you got to get IT on board first. Let's eat our own dog food, right? If we want the business to use it, let's bring on everyone in IT, and I did. And now this is going back 5 years now, and I was sitting at home, 12th of May 2017. Anyone remember what happened on that day? Because I remember it very clearly.
Tell us. Ransomware. WannaCry.
Yes. WannaCry. So, yeah, pretty much 5 years ago, I was sitting at home and I was connected to applications. And then I looked at this, and on my phone there was the BBC, right? You get these alerts, and the BBC said the NHS has been hit with a major cybersecurity attack. And then when I looked at it, I was like always fascinated by these things, and I looked at it and I was, wow, it's actually propagating using this SMB protocol. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. how am I protected against this? Or what's going to happen if one device is infected in the office? And I thought, well, it's a big flat network, right? The corporate network is one big flat network. So if one device is compromised, it will compromise all the others. I was like, ugh, gave me a bad feeling, right? And I'm going to have a lot of cleaning up to do, how I'm going to explain this. You know, I'm supposed to be protecting the company. And then I sat there and I went, what about me? I was like, nope, but I'm okay. I'm not on the network. Oh, that's strange. So I'm safe at home. So if all my users were at home, we'd all be safe. But when I go into the office, I'm not. That was the moment. I said, what have we been doing? Right? We've just been putting all these people into the network and said, yeah, you know, there's no one bad. There's not going to be anyone bad or anyone that's going to get infected and infect everyone, right? That was the point where I said, what have we been doing all this time? We needed to think of a different approach. And actually, the approach of just saying, hey, I'm an asset and I'm sitting on the internet. I have application access, but I'm not connected to the network. Was a really good approach. And that's, I think, the start of my journey for the real zero trust, trying to say, okay, now we need to think about having my users connected to the internet, letting the internet be the new corporate network, and completely removing my enterprise network, getting rid of all the firewalls and all of this stuff, right? That was the mindset, right, of driving that.
Can I rewind a bit? When you went from, you said use the first 5 years of, from 2010 to 2015, you said you removing or just making all your branch offices go straight to the internet. Yep. So there was, I'm assuming doing that was you consolidated some products, right?
Yes.
What I'm getting to is how many, the consolidation story of going from the old way of doing it, right? The castle and the moat, you call it, right?
Yep.
And going to this, to March 17th, 2017, along that journey, how many, what's a consolidation story there? Because I feel like that would be very, that's a story like a CIO would want to hear, right? That helps you. It's a money story. It's a freeing up resource story. There's a lot of good things that you would want to sell into the business there.
Yeah.
Or am I making that more important than it really is?
No, there is certainly a simplification, and actually where we actually saw a huge benefit is MPLS, right? The wide area network. Think about how expensive it is. Think about that we were sending internet traffic across that. So as the users started to consume more SaaS and more internet traffic, this was exploding. I had to go and buy bigger and bigger pipes, and they're expensive, especially when you're in 100 different locations in the world, right? Yeah. Some are even really expensive for this very small MPLS line. So breaking out all the traffic locally at every site, instantly, I didn't have to start upgrading my MPLS over those 5 years, right? So there was instant cost savings in the growth, right? But then it got, that was the first sort of 5 years, but then it got to the point where I said, do I even need the MPLS, right? And that came a little bit later, right? Because the first 5 years was really looking at having internet breakout and not having that traffic across the WAN. So there was a huge saving there. In the end of it, actually, we removed 85% of the MPLS. And that was actually done prior to COVID, right? And think about it, when everyone went home, and then there was no one even in the office. Think about all the companies that were paying for the expensive lines, and everyone's at home, right? So I think there was a huge cost saving and overhead that we could remove from the actual network. But in saying that, what if I didn't take that approach? I would have continued to put more and more firewalls. We would have put firewalls at the edge of our MPLS as well, right? We would have added more and more complexity to the network, right? So actually, I suppose because we started quite early, there was almost that we didn't take the same path as many other companies did and said, oh, we need sandboxing because, In 2010, nobody was talking about sandboxing. But in 2015, it was a technology that was looked at and said, actually, maybe we do need this, right? It is going to, find those advanced threats. And when I looked at sandboxing, I could have deployed 100 FireEye appliances across the organization and tried to work out where I was going to put them. And then they probably wouldn't have worked that well because all the traffic was encrypted anyway. Or I could just turn on a feature on the cloud, pay for a subscription, and it's done. And I think that was really where the part that I realized, just a minute, this is pretty cool, right? I can just add a service. There's no complexity on my side to implement, operate, and do it all. Tick the box, put the policy in, pay a subscription, and I now have advanced cloud sandboxing for every user, no matter where they are.
Now that did you actually finish that whole transition before you moved on? Did you actually see the whole project through? Did you accomplish zero trust? Okay. Your definition of zero trust before you left?
Okay, here's the funny part. I had this timeline from 2010 was actually to 2021, I think it was, or 22. Right? And then I had this thing at the end of the timeline. Zero trust completed. Nice. I had built that, right? I built this timeline. We'd done all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, we're going to be finished. And I laugh. I laugh at that now because what I've learned now is the journey's never finished. Right? It's never finished, right? Because it's always moving. It's a moving target. Because if you think about zero trust, it's a concept. And it's a very high level concept of least privilege, assume breach. And if you take all those concepts and then try to think about what you need to do and to achieve zero trust, there's always going to be improvement. There's always going to be areas to improve on. There's always going to be the adversary that's going to change their tactics. And then we need to think about, where we need to spend our time, right? So I almost look at that and think, actually, you've never really completed. We got a long way. I'm not going to say we didn't make a long way, but to say that you have completed and now we're zero trust, I think is really, it's not something that you can say you're done with, right?
So when you walked away from your previous employer, I mean, like, okay, you had completely changed the network as they would have defined it, right? Like now everything is going through some sort of single pane of glass almost, right? Everything's software defined through a central place. Not everything, but many things. How would you help sell that in to those that are trying to accomplish what you're talking about today, besides the whole besides that story that I just sort of alluded to?
So I think one of the lessons I learned from doing this whole transition is that technology is great to have some technology that you can adopt and you can move towards zero trust. And you can actually adopt the technology, a new technology. It's not that hard, right? So for me to adopt this new way of working, sure I had to get the buy-in. Sure I had to sell the business model that we're going to save money, we're going to make the users happy, and we're going to make sure that we're secure. Sure I had to do that. Adopting the technology was not the hard part. So to people out there, it's not the hard part to move towards a more zero trust approach. The biggest problem I see is legacy. So in any big, large enterprise, we have applications that are, end of life, servers, that are no longer supported by Microsoft, clients that we have to keep upgrading, right? All of this legacy, and we're not able to remove it all, right? Somebody's left the company, they don't know about it. In the OT space, there's servers sitting in the corner, no one wants to even touch them because they don't know what they're doing, right? So I think there's a big problem with what we've done over the last 30 years. We've done lots of stuff, right? Almost like workarounds. Put this here, put the server here. We've all been busy in IT. And then what we've got is all this complexity and layers of things. And then it becomes really difficult, right? And untwining that complexity and coming back to a model where you just say, my network is the transport. It's only going to move packets as fast and reliable as possible, and that's it. It's not going to secure my users. It's not going to make them go through a stateful firewall. That is the hard part. Because if you ask me now, does that company still have firewalls? Like, did you get rid of them all? No, I didn't. I didn't get rid of them all. And I have to reflect and think, why didn't I get rid of all of the firewalls, right? And then I'm like, that's because I've got some legacy sitting here, some small use case, some special case here, and something that I need this for this, right? So even though I could solve 89% of it, even though if I could solve that for those use cases, I always had this, sort of like the 80-20 rule, always had these other use cases over here that I needed something else sitting over the corner here that was doing something special. So I really think that it's hard to shift the legacy, and I think that's the transformation. Yeah. So even though you're adopting zero trust, the transformation journey is the simplification, right? And that's why I quite like this whole idea of, what an electric car does, right? Because it's a very simple approach, right? There's only so many moving parts, and why I felt that companies need to start looking at how do I simplify my infrastructure? How do I take control back and say, do you know what? I don't own the network anymore. Look at 5G. When 5G is in every laptop, do I need to come in the office and connect to the Wi-Fi? Or do I just use my 5G? And having that mindset that, hey, stop spending your time inside your castle trying to protect the castle, and think about, actually, how do I protect those users connecting to that SaaS application? And that's, I think, the mindset change that we need to start thinking about. And I believe that if we don't start removing the complexity, the complexity is not going to secure us, right? And that's not going to help us in the future.
Do you think a part of the problem is that people are not aware of the solutions that are available out there?
Yeah, I think it's two parts. I think not enough people are aware of that there are solutions that are more software defined and better. And I think it's a little bit like no one believes it. No one would buy an electric sports car. So I think there's this sort of mindset that, hey, yeah, this is different, but I'm a bit scared of it, right? I've even heard people say, I'm actually scared of zero trust. So there's a bit of reluctance to move into it. It is different. But as we see now, there's going to be a pivotal point where more and more companies adopt it. They see the benefits. And then at a certain point, then you're going to say, actually, we've hit the mass, and it's sort of like the Gartner curve, right? Then we're going to see more and more adoption. And I think we're early days. I mean, honestly, we are still early days. Even though 5 years ago, I was sitting there and worrying about WannaCry and thinking about, we need to change it. I look today and go, companies still have flat networks. They still put all the users in their network. So have we learned anything from some of these events? Not really. Have we changed fast enough? No, we haven't changed fast enough. But I think there is hope, because you can see the market is slowly changing, and I hope when we get to that pivotal point where more and more companies take on zero trust and a different way of working, then we'll see a huge acceleration.
Where do you think we are in that hype cycle? We're on the path.
Yeah.
We've went up. I would assume that we're on our way down from that up, and then we're about to start going up again.
Yeah. The hype cycle. Yeah.
The path of illusionment or something like that. Yeah, in the middle there.
So I suppose we're at different points depending on whether we want to talk about secure service edge or SASE or zero trust, right? I think they're probably all slightly different on the hype. Yeah. But remember, the hype is, different to the adoption. Right?
The adoption, yeah. That's where we're at now almost.
Because the adoption today, if we look at the market today, only 10% of the world are using zero trust network access instead of VPN.
Okay.
So think about that.
Okay.
About 10%, right? Not a lot, right? So I think we are still very early days in the whole zero trust and what it can provide and getting companies more, educated on this, right? I mean, this is why I love talking about it, because I'm out here now, and why I joined Zscaler is because, not only because I like their technology, but because I wanted to get my word out there to tell people, hey, there is a better way, right? Stop using all your old stuff here. Change the ways of how you are connecting users to applications, and you'll see all the benefits, right? And I think it's really important that we actually make the internet a safer place to do business, right? Because I look every day and I have a Google thing that shows me, the list of ransomware, right? It shows me all the ransomware news. And every day I look and go, there's another company. Another company hit with ransomware, and I think, it doesn't have to be like that, right? If we change our mindset in the way we are protecting our users and our data, then I'm sure that we could certainly reduce my news list. I don't see that getting any shorter.
No, right? And just some motivation to the others out there that have this vision in their head, but they aren't ready to quite take the step. You made it.
Yep.
You got 12 years later. You are where you are today. You have a nicer microphone than me, so and nicer headphones. So you're doing something right.
Yeah, I must be doing something right.
What was that quote? The ending quote for us today. It was an Elon Musk. He said it. Something about it's the crazy ones that change the world or something.
Oh yeah, so that was that. So that was Steve Jobs, right? Yeah.
The Steve Jobs. Yeah. The ones who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
There you go.
Mr. Fergusson, thank you for your time.
Thank you.